Now, if you were coming to Zoom Sunday School before Christmas, you may remember that we learnt about Father Abraham, the very first Israelite. He went to live in the land of Canaan, the land that we now call Israel, and he had a son called Isaac. And Isaac had twin sons. He had Esau, who had lots of red hair, even red hairy arms, and he was a hunter. And I've given him 2 swords because he had a bit of a fiery temper. And then his twin brother was called Jacob, and he was the quiet one. And today we're going to learn about Jacob's family. Now, Jacob had 12 sons. He had 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 grown-up sons, and then he had Joseph, who was about 17 years old at the time of our story. And then the son number 12 was little Benjamin, who was the youngest, and he may even have been a baby at the time our story begins. Now, Jacob was quite a wealthy man, and you may remember that he had a lot of animals, and he had a lot, and I do mean a lot, of sheep. And the 10 grown-up brothers were shepherds, and they went to the fields every day to find green grass for the sheep to eat and to look after them and to make sure that they had plenty of water to drink. And that was their job. Now, Jacob, he made a big mistake. He really did get something wrong. He had a favourite son, and parents should never have favourites, but Jacob's favourite son was Joseph. And because Joseph was Jacob's favourite son, he gave him a special coat. It was a coat with many colours. It was a very beautiful coat. And I'm afraid that Joseph used to tell tales to his father Jacob about his brothers. Father, do you know what my brothers have done? And Jacob used to listen to those tales. Really? Tell me more. So you probably won't be surprised when I tell you that because Joseph told tales to his father about his brothers, and because Jacob loved Joseph more than any of the other brothers, the brothers didn't like Joseph very much. In fact, they hated him. And when they were out in the fields with the sheep, they used to tell tales to each other about Joseph. Oh, that Joseph. He thinks he's so much better than everybody else. Oh, with his special coat. Oh, and he's telling tales to Father about us. Oh, he thinks he's so much better than us. Oh, we really don't like Joseph. Now, one night when Joseph went to bed, we'll just take his coat off for him to go to bed, Joseph had a funny dream. And this is what he dreamt. He dreamt that it was harvest time, and he was out in the fields with his brothers bringing in the wheat harvest, and they were making the wheat into sheaves. And Joseph's wheat sheaf suddenly stood up straight, and all of his brothers' wheat sheaves gathered around Joseph's wheat sheaf and then bowed down to it. Well, what a very strange dream. Well, the next morning, Joseph decided to tell his brothers about his dream. So he called them all together, and there were rather a lot of them, and he said, "Guess what? I had a really funny dream last night. We were all out in the fields gathering wheat into sheaves, and then my wheat sheaf stood up straight, and all your wheat sheaves gathered round, and they bowed down to mine. Now, I know what that means. It means that I'm going to become more important than you, and you are going to bow down to me. How about that?" "Well," said the brothers, "we all know what you think. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? You think you're going to rule over us like some sort of king." And then they hated him even more. Well, it's not really going well for Joseph and his brothers, is it? And I'm afraid it got worse. So another night, when Joseph was in bed, asleep again, he had another funny dream. And this is what he dreamt. This time he dreamt about the sun and the moon and the stars. And in this picture, I think the moon is in front of the sun. And in the dream, the sun and the moon represented his mother and father Jacob, and the stars represented the brothers. And the sun and the moon and the stars were all bowing down to Joseph. Well, what a funny dream. And then he woke up. And the next morning, he decided to tell his brothers about his dream. And this time he also told his father Jacob. Now, I have to say that his father Jacob was very angry. Do you actually think that your mother and father and your brothers are all going to bow down to the ground before you? And of course the brothers went away very angry, and they hated him even more. Well, later on, the brothers went out to the fields to look after the sheep again. And Jacob spoke to Joseph. "Go out to the fields," he said. "Check that your brothers are okay, and then come back and report to me." So Joseph, of course, put on his special coat of many colours, and he went to find his brothers in the fields. And eventually he did spot them. But they saw him coming from a distance. "Oh no, here he comes. Here comes the dreamer, and he's got his coat on." And then they hatched a very evil and very deadly plan. "Let's kill him," they said. "We'll kill him and then throw his body into a pit. Then we'll go home and tell our father that wild animals killed him. He'll never know it was us." But Reuben, the eldest, then spoke to the other brothers. "Let's not actually kill him. We'll just throw him into the pit for a while. That will be enough of a punishment for him." So when Joseph arrived, they stripped him of his coloured coat. And then they threw Joseph into a pit. Well, a bit later on, when Reuben wasn't with them. And they were all having their dinner, still in the field and quite near the pit. Some travellers came. With their camels. And they were travelling towards Egypt, and they were going to sell some spices down in Egypt. Well, the brothers saw the travellers, and then Judah had an idea. "I know," he said. "Instead of leaving Joseph in the pit, let's sell him to these travellers as a slave. Then we haven't got to kill him. We can still get rid of him, but we'll get some money." So they pulled Joseph back up out of the pit, and they sold him to the travellers for 20 silver coins, which was about the going rate for a slave in those days. Well, then Reuben came back, and he looked into the pit, and Joseph wasn't there. "What are we going to do now?" he said. And then they hatched another evil plan. "Here's his coloured coat," said the others. "What we'll do is get some animal blood and put it on the coat, and then take it back to our father and tell him that we found it and that wild animals must have eaten Joseph." So that is what they did. When they got back to Jacob, they showed him the coat, all covered with blood. And Jacob cried and cried and cried and refused to be comforted. Meanwhile, the travellers took Joseph to Egypt and sold him to an important official called Potiphar. And we will find out what happened to him there next week. But the important things to remember from this week's Bible story are this: everyone got things wrong. Jacob got things wrong when he favoured one son over the others. Parents should never do this. It just isn't fair. Joseph got things wrong by telling tales about his brothers and showing off. And the brothers all got things wrong by hating, plotting a murder, selling their brother, and lying to their father. You see, things go wrong when we don't live as God wants us to. But God is still in charge, and because He is God, He will sort it out. But you will have to wait and find out what happens next to see how He does it.